Well, finally to Kentucky. Didn't know what to think of these people when I first got up there, besides the fact that they're crazy. Very first day, Richard and I got to talking a lot about theology. You see, they were formerly part of what was called the Worldwide Church of God. Armstrong, I'm trying to remember his full name. Herbert W. Armstrong. Now, a lot of you probably never heard of him. If, however, you were watching religious shows back in the 80s, you may have. He was pretty big there for a while. Basically, the theology that they adopted, the Worldwide Church of God had dissipated a long time ago. I'll be getting into that later. And there were a lot of splinter groups. They called themselves Sabbatarians. Well, the theology basically is that everything in the Bible is absolutely 100% true. Jews keep a number of holy days besides just the Sabbath on Saturday, Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. They have a number of holy days. In English, they're the Day of Atonement and Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles, etc., etc. Not important to go into details. They're all in Leviticus, I believe, if you're interested. Well, we got into talking about their theology. Now, I had already believed that as a Christian, you should be keeping the Passover. And I didn't understand why people didn't, as Christians. It is pretty much said in the Bible that you are to continue to keep this for all time. And people who adopt themselves and graft themselves in to being Jews, basically, which Christians are. Christians are just a Jewish cult group. It might be a really big one, but that's basically what they are. Well, I'm not going to talk a lot about theology. It's not important. And I am not going to argue Christian theology because I just don't care. I'm not a Christian anymore, and I don't care when you keep the Sabbath. I don't care what you do in your church. Well, what was important at the time is that Richard, the leader, claimed to me that he had been given a revelation shortly before I came there. And that revelation was that the man who would be the spiritual leader of their group would be coming, and he would be coming with the teacher. So he expected two. Well, at that point I wanted to be a teacher. Anyway, I'll get into that in a bit. First day, Richard was sitting they put me in my first place that I stayed in there, up there, for a couple months was a place just big enough to fit a couch. Just big enough to fit a couch. It was actually a, what do you call it, what do you know, couches that fold down. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it was just big enough to hold a couch. So it was maybe 3 feet wide, 3 feet by 10, maybe. Couldn't stand up in it. But it was a roof over my head. A lot better than a rock. And I had food in my stomach. So, I sat there and lo and behold, all these things that I've been thinking about. And now, look, I'm with a group who thinks it too. I wonder how that happened. Well, God, no, excuse me, not God, Jehovah had interceded in my life again. I don't care how pissed off you Christians get when I say it. Jehovah is a minor God. He's nobody. The only reason you know anything about him is because his little buddy Satan is the one. He's the one who got Jehovah his status that he has now. Jehovah would have been nothing. The Jews would have been lost. They would have been lost to all eternity if it wasn't for Constantine. Read your history books. Or, because none of you probably even own a book beside the Bible, look it up online. Constantine. If it wasn't for Constantine, who became emperor of Rome, Christianity would have been nothing but a Jewish cult group that may or may not still exist and have maybe a few million members. That's the facts. And that was done by Satan. Not by Jehovah even though Satan was created by Jehovah. Yep. And I ain't talking about before he fell. Jehovah created Satan for one purpose, to be a stumbling block to Jews. Now he's become the god of this world. Become very powerful. More powerful than Jehovah. That's why he needs me. Anyway, Richard asked me, very first day, have I ever heard of a Papillon? I said, sounds like a French word to me. I don't know what that is. Papillon. He said it's the head of the church here. And I believe you to be him. He wasn't just wanting me to be a member of his little community. He was wanting me to be the head of the church. He would be the head of the secular, the king. This is what they believed was going to go on. Okay, we had 3 at that point. There was him, the king, me, eventually, and another guy who was like a bishop. Or no, not like a bishop, like a, what do you call it? A deacon. Somebody who runs the church. Somebody who runs the nuts and bolts. I was a spiritual leader, and Richard was the secular leader. With 3, whenever we had a problem between the 3 of us, we could come to a vote, and it would be majority rules. And that happened a couple of times. Until this other guy left, and then everything went to shit, because it was Richard and I, him telling me what the hell to do with the church, me not telling him what to do secularly, but him always stepping in to tell me what to do with my church. Yes, I have been a preacher. People, not only do I know history, I know the Bible. I know it backwards and forwards. I know it backwards and forwards. Well, first few days, I started to get pretty creeped out by these people. They listened to the Spirit in a very bizarre manner. It was like they were, what do you call it? People who have spirits who come through them. What is the name of that? They had a number of spirits that came through them, especially, of course, Richard. I was going to leave. These people are crazy. As much as I believed that my God, at that point, Jehovah, wanted me there, I was still going to leave. Then, I know I'm missing something. I am missing something. Then, Richard told me he wanted to show me something. I was going to leave this day, that he did this. I've been there 3 days, I think. He said, I want to show you something in this book. It was a child's Bible story book. It was a story, I think it's in Judges, about a guy who's beating the hell out of a donkey because the donkey won't move because there's an angel in front of him. The donkey speaks to the man and asks him, "Why are you beating me?" This is in the Bible, folks. Didn't say it happened, I just said it's in there. That was what made me decide to stay. Who am I to judge how the Spirit comes through a man when he can come through a donkey, right? That's what he wanted me to think, and that's what I thought, and that's why I stayed. Now, it's important for me to get into this, the basic idea of who Richard was and why we were there. Richard believed there is a book by the Worldwide Church of God called The United States and Britain in Prophecy. Good read. You may believe it, you may not believe it, but it's a good read, just the same. It proposes that the very throne of David, I won't go into detail, but the very throne of David is now presently in England. That the Queen now, and all of the royal family before her, sat on the very throne of David, the same throne that the Christ himself will sit upon when he comes again, the second coming. Which, by the way, I still believe, or know, is going to happen, just not the way you Christians think. Christ ain't coming to give you a pat on the back, I'll tell you that. Anyway, Richard believed, and they believed, the whole group up there, wasn't, what, 15 people, I guess, believed that Richard is going to sit on this same throne. Not as Christ, but he was going to sit on it until Christ came. This was their basic concept. And there were those up there that called him His Majesty. I never did. You got to understand, I had nothing and nobody. My own family had thrown me out, whether they were justified or not. I asked who I believed to be God to direct me in His path, and He puts me in the path of these people. So you've got to understand, I was doing what I believed was the will of God. How many of you Christians ever go out of your way and do anything for your God? I've done everything for Him, for Jehovah, and now for the true God, Sophia, my mother, the Divine Feminine, and Creator of the universe. And that's the end of number 15.